Hey guys, welcome back, and we're going to do a little video today with you on the influence of the shaft and the true influence on launch and spin.
Yes, so we got a really good question yesterday. It was more or less about, having not ideal launch conditions with a certain head,
Right.
Too much spin and too much launch, and
Yeah.
would it make sense to make a significant shaft change
Yeah.
in order to remedy that?
With the same head?
With the same head.
Right.
And so my reaction to that was probably not, because the shaft may not be as influential as, let's say, a different head design or a lower loft or something like that.
Okay. Well, that's a really interesting one for me, because what I tend to see is different heads, because of the different design characteristics, the different DNA that's in those heads, and they're designed for different types of players. It doesn't mean that then there's one shaft that will fit all the heads across the spectrum. There's not one shaft for any given player that's going to work with every head.
Yeah.
So the head and shaft have to complement each other.
Exactly.
One of the questions I get most often is, which is more important, the head or the shaft?
Yeah, that's
Right?
the question that we see a lot.
And people go, well, the shaft's the really important bit.
Right.
And I go, well, if you're in the wrong head,
I know.
it doesn't really, it's not really going to do you much good either. So we're going to do a little video on that today.
Yeah.
So we're going to we're going to get Matt to hit a driver head that has kind of higher launch, higher spin characteristics, generally speaking, with a super low launch, low spin shaft.
Yes.
And then we're going to take a really low launch, low spin head and put it with a shaft that has a softer tip and designed to kick it up a little bit more.
Exactly.
And then we're going to see kind of how that shakes out. And with your type of swing, Matt, we're going to see, what it ends up doing.
Yeah, and it's kind of the case of probably what you wouldn't fit someone this way, because they're probably ill-suited, because they look to achieve totally different things.
Right.
But that's the kind of thing that people do, is they maybe have a head that doesn't really suit them.
Yeah.
And it's harder to let go of the driver head and say, this head is wrong, than to say, I'm just going to change the shaft. And so I guess we can get into, once we test, we can talk about, what's your best course of action? Right. With heads being adjustable now, maybe that means just taking a bit of loft off it. Maybe you do need a different head rather than a different shaft. Maybe the shaft you have is great. And the head is just a non-starter for you. So that's kind of what I think would be a great takeaway from this.
Yeah, I mean, because I'm sure you guys wonder, with the plethora of shaft options that there are out there, like, where do I start?
I know.
Where do I even begin to pick the right one?
Especially if they came in here and looked behind you, they'd say,
well,
where do I start?
People get intimidated by it because they kind of go, how are we ever going to narrow it down?
Yeah.
But, you guys obviously trust us enough to know that we know the shaft profiles inside out.
For sure.
We know how they're going to complement the heads, because we know the DNA of those heads inside and out.
Yes.
So, even just from any one range, whether it be, a standard Rogue versus a Rogue Sub-Zero,
exactly,
those heads perform entirely different, and they're supposed to.
Yeah.
The moment of inertia is different. The adjustability of the CG on the Sub-Zero makes it different from even the heavyweight forward to the heavyweight back.
Which we talked about, and so that's this here. So this weight versus that weight. You were saying you can tweak hundreds of RPMs just from that.
That's right. It can be 300-400 RPMs just by moving that weight around a little bit.
Which is amazing,
Yeah, I mean, influencing things like strike point dependent on the bend profile of the shaft. If we take a shaft that is much more sort of tip active, then you can actually get the angle of attack to move more upward, because the shaft's deflecting more and that sweet spot's traveling more upward than it would do if you were playing a very tip stiff shaft. So I had a really good conversation with a teaching pro in this area the other day about that, and he was asking me for one of his students, he thinks her shafts are too soft and she's getting too much deflection from the shaft. Could that change angle of attack? 100% it can. Without a doubt it can.
One of the more interesting things that I learned from you was that whole thing, because launch and spin are what everyone thinks a fitting is about.
Right.
But what you're saying is the shaft has more to do with that whole story than really that part of it.
It's golf club dynamics.
Right.
It's what the loft in motion, the shaft in motion, the rotation, everything in motion, what it does. And then obviously there's the part where, depending on how the player feels when they're holding the club, when they're swinging the club, how the balance changes their timing, and if it enhances their timing versus it kind of makes them look for their timing. If you can't time that golf club, you're going to be really inconsistent. Your strike point is going to be all over the club face, and that's one of the reasons we love GC Quad so much, is we can plot those strike points all over the face.
Yeah.
So it's, we've got all the tools to do it, so we don't guess, we measure.
I know. And that's, even before we test, I think that's the takeaway, is don't think that your head and shaft choice are for launch angle and ball spin.
Yeah.
Because there's 1,000 other things that they'll affect, and maybe more so.
And that's so true. Some shafts that are categorized as low launch, low spin in the wrong person's hands will actually produce much higher launch.
Based on their swing.
Based on the way they load that shaft. Maybe they don't load the shaft, maybe it's too stiff for them to load. So, it doesn't really work in the dynamic motion that it's intended to.
Cool.
But it's all about, go find the right fitter who can then obviously pinpoint the shafts and heads that are going to complement your game the most. So we're going to do that with Matt today. We're going to take a couple of shafts that we know are kind of
let's take a look here.
in Matt's kind of sort of bend profile range, or certainly flex category and weight category range. So we've got the Acra Tour Z Extreme. We're going to go with the 465 M5 in that one. So really stiff profile. So the Acra series, the 400s are the most tip stiff shafts out there.
Really? Used
by guys like Tony Finau, guys who really hit it, really load it. They trust the tip stiffness of that.
So an extreme case in that shaft design, and we're going to pair that with something that's more of a high launch head in the Ping G400
G400 Max, something that would generally be considered higher MOI, CG a little bit further back in order to promote sort of high launch.
Right, and not the lowest spin head out there, obviously.
No, and not even the lowest spin of the Ping range.
Of course, yeah.
That they have the LS Tech, which was going to launch a little lower, launch and spin a little lower.
And then we're going to go the other direction.
Yep.
So we've got the Rogue Sub-Zero, which, as you said, is like one of the lowest spinning heads you can find.
One of the lower kind of flighted heads. They'll definitely, take a little spin off and launch it a little bit lower. And we're going to pair that up with the Graphite Design MJ.
Right.
Okay, so really tip soft. Actually, a shaft that's played quite widely on the LPGA Tour. So, the LPGA players trying to kind of get the launch up and spin down a little bit. Right. So, they like to have a little more tip active shaft.
Interesting.
Than some of the guys on the PGA Tour. So, that's what we're going to pair up, and we're going to do that little comparison, see how it shakes out.
See what makes more difference is kind of what we want to find out.
Okay. Okay guys, welcome back, and a really interesting little set of results there. We put Matt through his paces with obviously the Rogue Sub-Zero with the graphite design MJ6X. We obviously know that is one of the lower spin and lower launching heads out there. And we made it play that way, didn't we? We moved the weight forward, the 12 gram forward, we had the 2 at the back, so we really made it very, very, we moved the CG really far forward, made it really low launch. And obviously we don't have the ability to do that with the G400 Max. The weight is in the back and it's fixed. So we know that head, as its standard properties, is a little higher launch, a little higher spin.
So we went kind of not too, I shouldn't say two extremes, because this is obviously not an extremely high launch and high spin head, because nothing is anymore.
That's right.
But the Rogue Sub-Zero, like that thing is about as low as you can possibly get. And this is kind of a good mid-launch club.
And we really wanted to go like for like on loft. We wanted to keep the loft the same so we could truly influence.
So, sorry, 9 for both.
9 for both.
9 for both.
And we wanted to make that so it could have the biggest influence on what the shaft was truly doing for that.
Yeah.
So let's kind of have a look at the results here. We'll see, we hit the Rogue Sub-Zero first time around. We averaged about 171 ball speed on both.
Yep, more or
within
less
a couple
the
of
same.
decimal points. Really interesting. So the high launch shaft produced significantly lower ball flight to the tune of 40 feet.
Crazy, crazy different.
The graphite design MJ shaft, soft tip, and it is, we use it as a go-to high launch shaft all the time if somebody needs a little bit more of an active tip section. For you, it just didn't perform that way.
No.
There
was nothing I could have done to launch, or the launch was one thing, but there's nothing I could have done to spin that more.
You were delivering it good. Your feedback to me was like, I can't hit this better.
No,
and I literally can't hit it.
I would have had to start lifting it up in the air to get that thing to go any higher.
Manufacturing loft. Looking at the backspin, it was 1468 on average. It's so low.
Yeah.
And we talk about that, don't we, and how kind of dangerous it is to go with spin rates that are that low because it can cause the ball flight to be super aggressive.
And we saw that, like they'll have watched the recording and you'll see it's a very aggressive looking low kind of hot ball.
When I talk about aggressive, what we mean basically is the curvature is kind of exaggerated, so it goes out there. And if the spin axis is tilted, one way or the other, it's much easier to tilt the spin axis when you have lower spin.
Easier for it to get away from you.
Exactly, so the spin axis will tilt and you'll get a really sharp curve one way or the other. So it's just so low, and we actually couldn't believe how low it was. It produced some massive drives.
For sure, yeah.
I think that might be the longest drive we've ever seen. You hit 321 carry, 348 total.
And then you look at the numbers to do that, 16 launch, 1300 spin. That's
ridiculous.
Like long drive characteristics.
Yeah.
But those guys are not playing golf with that because they would shoot 1,000 over par. So
exactly. So over to the G400 Max with the super tip stiff Acra Tour Z Extreme shaft in it. So that guy, monster shaft, used by, like we said, Tony Finau, one of the kind of quickest swingers on tour.
Yeah.
Somebody who really loads it.
And it felt extremely stiff.
You said that, didn't you? Yeah, straight away, because you hit that second, you said how stiff that felt.
Yeah. Obviously everything after the other one would be stiffer, but still, like that's a very stiff shaft. So to see the high, not high spinning, but total, as you said, total height, those were very high launching, good spinning shots with a driver shaft that should have been hitting the knuckleballs that the other one did.
So well balanced.
Yeah.
13.9 launch, 2300 spin.
Yeah.
It's a fraction high for what we would, we would dial that down a little bit.
For sure, yeah.
For you, but it was so nice in terms of flight. So the ball flight was just doing the same. Look at those flights; they were all the same. If we go over to the compare page, and look at those, the ball flight was just kind of doing the same thing all the time. Now it's a little bit high in peak, but that's with the lowest launch, lowest spin and shaft.
I know.
Basically that we have in the store.
And that's kind of the whole point of this video I wanted to say was, okay, this driver here, the way we've configured it, it doesn't suit me because I hit up on it a bit.
Yep.
And so the amount of spin reduction on this one, it's too much.
Yeah.
Right? This one, I already know I've hit it in a couple fittings that we've done.
Yep.
And this one actually suits me quite well.
Right.
So even when we went and completely ill-suited two shafts to it, it didn't overcome the head difference whatsoever. And
kind of here's the punchline, guys. The head characteristics are dictating what's going on here, not the shafts.
Yes.
And we're not discounting the role of the shaft. The shaft is hugely important. for us to really dial it into the player's preferences and their ability to load it and time it and all these sorts of things. But the thing that creates 13.5 degrees of launch with 14, 6 to 8 spin, it's the head.
That's the head. So that is the punchline to me.
Yeah, that's the punchline.
Because the shaft, yes, it has massive effect. And I think your expertise has shown a lot of people how important the shaft is, but not for that.
Not in this scenario. Yeah. No, and that's where we wanted to sort of go. It's not as black and white, guys, as going, if you want to hit the ball lower, you go and get yourself a low launch shaft.
Yes.
And that, with air quotes. What head's it going into? How do you hit it? Where do you strike it in the face? What are your tendencies? Etc., etc.
Totally.
Whereas the ping is clearly, we all know this, we know what the ping is designed to do. It's designed to launch high with low spin, but not crazy low spin. The Sub-Zero for that, it's named for that reason. Yeah. It's designed to be super low spin.
Yeah.
So if we look at that 13.9 launch, 2,300 spin, that's just a nice balance. Now, the one thing that stops that being nicely balanced is Matt's excessive ball speed.
Right.
If you guys are out there swinging that and your average 145 mile an hour ball speed and you're launching it at 13.9, spinning at 2,300, you and I are going to be high-fiving each other going, what a driver that is. It's just a little bit high for what you need.
Right.
You need your launch about 11 with that spin.
And I think when we fit this driver for me another time, we probably went down to the 8.
We opened it.
Yeah.
We took loft off.
And that made it really perfect.
Yep, it was. Yeah, one of our
but it
previous
just shows you. I mean, the difference in those two heads versus the difference in those two shafts.
Yep.
They were equal, specs-wise, very extremes, both of them, but the head made way more difference.
If we were mapping the CG of the heads as well, the center of gravity on the Ping G400 Max would be further back than it would be on the Rogue
and you can
Sub-Zero.
see that from the profile of it.
Yeah, so the weight is back here. I mean, that's where this tungsten weight is back here, so really stabilizing.
Do both at once here.
Yeah, so and then obviously this is the two weights there, has the weight, and we moved it forward for the purpose of exaggerating the effect of the video. So what happens when we bring a driver with the CG forward, what happens is the driver head does not rotate as quickly. When you bring the CG back, the head wants to do that more, wants to rotate more when the CG is further back.
Really? Okay.
So if we look at those ball flights on there, we can see the club with the CG further back wanted to draw, and the club with the CG further forward wanted to stay out to the left.
See, I didn't know that at all.
And I left that one to the end.
Yeah, really didn't know that at all.
So one of the things we keep up our sleeve to influence the rotation of the face is where the CG is positioned.
Wow.
So if I want to eliminate the rotation of the head for someone, I'll push the weighting further forward in the head, trying to keep that face from closing. So, there's so many different ways we can influence the club to perform how we need it to. And weights, some people don't like weights. I love weights because it allows me to do my job better.
Yeah. Well, I also think that you know so much more about things like that the weights mean more to you because you actually know what they can do beyond tweaking in ball flight. Because you're just talking about actually tweaking someone's club face angle, which is nuts. I mean, I don't think anyone that's out there is really going to be familiar with the CG location being related to face rotation. That's got to be a big kind of aha moment for people.
I hope so. I hope so, yeah. I mean, these are the types of little nuggets we're hoping to drop into these videos that make them valuable to you guys. And, when you're picking a driver, if you know that you're maybe you're over rotating the club face and you're kind of hitting it a little bit hooky, for example. Don't shy away from the Rogue Sub-Zero 10.5. Maybe if you're a 10.5 guy, maybe try the Sub-Zero version and see if that stops the head rotating as much. Maybe you go 10.5 and put it on the sort of neutral -1 setting to set the head a little open with the weight forward, and that can really stop the head from over rotating. Something like that could really help you guys hit it more accurately.
Because the ability to play with the loft is a huge factor.
Yeah.
So you could overcome the fact that maybe the Sub-Zero is too low spin for someone, but give them more loft, maybe it's not.
It's it, and understanding how to achieve less loft, we have to alter face angle because we're not actually taking the loft down.
Yes.
The loft is what it is. It's made that way. So, but we're presetting the head for you, and I'm doing this left-handed.
Yep.
You know, we're actually opening the head slightly. You know, to lose 1 degree of
This
loft,
way.
we have to open the face 2 degrees.
Right.
So, in order to do that, so you know, all those sorts of things, guys, all those little factors that combine to really, you know, make the driver as optimal as can be.
There's some people that think the shaft is everything when it comes to this.
And that's it. They call it the engine of the club and all this sorts of
But
things.
it is in some ways. But it's not in this category of launch and spin where you need to focus more on the head.
Yeah.
And then, but don't ignore the shaft when it comes to the dynamics of the swing and things like that.
Yeah, the timing involved and how it loads to create the timing and all these sorts of things. I mean, you know, for me, the shaft is the part that the player can sort of be at one with, if you like, you know, if you want to kind of put a rosy term on it, you know, they can really feel it, create the energy that matches their tempo and all that sort of thing. And the head is really what's delivering the ball flight kind of adjustments, high, low, loft is huge. You know, I would rather change loft than go to a high launch or a low launch shaft.
Yeah.
Move the loft. That's what it's there for. That's why we have a 9 and a 10.5. You know, shafts are springs. They're there to create energy.
Right.
Right. So in different bend profiles will, as we always say, they will make you feel something different. So a softer butt section will make you feel like, you know, the shaft isn't as stiff, but down at the tip section it may be very stiff, and that may stabilize the head to do what it is that you need it to do. But you know, moving that bend profile, you know, however we understand that EI curve to be, is exactly why we'll choose certain shafts.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think this is. Hopefully this is exactly what we were trying to accomplish. When we looked at the numbers from the test, we thought this is kind of what we wanted to communicate. So hopefully that makes sense. Let us know in the comments if that was you know, beneficial for the average person, because I think it's just it comes down to buying decisions a lot of the time. It's like, I have this driver head, it's not working. Should I bother going and spending $500 on a shaft? Yeah. And I, you know, maybe not, because if that head is just totally wrong, you're throwing good money after bad by saying, let me try to, you know, fix this thing. Maybe just start with a different head and you're better off. Yeah, exactly. There's so many moving parts. I mean, I don't know how you guys do it out there, you know, when you're not being fit. It's tough, it's quite difficult, you know, to really achieve the right balance of everything. I mean, you might get, you know, 6 out of 10 performance out of driver, but why not get, you know, 10? 10, I know. Why not get 10? You know, we saw that with Sam's fit. You know, Sam's fit. Sam got 10 out of 10. He did. For what he walked in with versus what he walked out with, he got 10. Yeah. And that was just the club allowed him to make the best swing that he could make. Yeah. It allowed the most correction to the swing he makes. You know, we'll probably use Sam's example from now till the end of time. I was going to say, for a few years to come. It's a good referral video for sure. Exactly. We struck a bit of gold with that one. 100%. So, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Hope it's been informative. I hope you can all take something away from it, that it's not as black and white as low launch, low spin shafts go low, high launch or high spin shafts go high. It doesn't always work like that. The head plays a huge part. The player and their preferences play a big part. Test it, try it, measure it, and you'll get the best one for you.